I never believed revenge could be quiet. I always pictured it as loud, explosive, the kind of thing that ends with slamming doors or police at the front step. But the revenge I delivered, it was silent precisely and wrapped in the soft scent of lavender, old wood, and my grandmother's memory. All it took was one woman, my dad's new girlfriend, deciding my house, the home I inherited from the only grandmother I ever loved, needed a woman's touch. She thought she could bulldoze my boundaries. She thought she could take over. She thought she could ignore every no I ever told her. So I gave her something she couldn't ignore, something she would never forget. Before we get into this haunting little tale of boundaries, disrespect, and the sweetest psychological revenge I've ever carried out, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This channel is where justice gets served cold, calm, and incredibly satisfying. Now let me take you inside my home, and into the moment one woman learned why you never, ever play with someone else's legacy. I inherited my grandmother's house 3 years ago. A modest two-story place on a quiet street, tucked behind a pair of old maple trees that creak on windy nights. Most people would call it outdated. Creaky floors, thick wallpaper, brass fixtures, a narrow staircase. But to me, it was a treasure chest. I grew up in this house. I learned to braid my hair in the mirror at the end of the hall. I ate late, night cookies in the kitchen that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and cinnamon. And after my grandmother passed, this house felt like the last physical piece of her. So when my dad asked to move in after his divorce, I said yes immediately. It felt safe, comforting, like the two of us could put our lives back together under her roof. For 2 years, it was comforting. We had our routines. He'd cook on Fridays. I'd handle Sundays. We watched game shows at night. We didn't step on each other's space. It was peaceful, predictable, ours. Then Linda entered the picture. Linda, where do I even start? My dad met her through a coworker. She was loud, confident, always dressed in clothes that looked like they belonged in a real estate brochure. She wasn't a bad person, not at first glance, but she had this way of behaving like she'd been in our lives far longer than she actually had. On their third date, she walked straight into our house, sniffed the air, and said, this place could use a woman's touch. I laughed awkwardly. Dad gave me a look that said, please don't start. And Linda swanned in like she already owned the place. Her boundary issues started small, innocent looking, harmless at first. One afternoon I came home and found new throw pillows on our couch. Ugly floral things that clashed with literally everything in the room. Oh, Linda brought those, Dad said. She thought they'd brighten things up. Right. Brighten. Because clearly my grandmother's taste wasn't bright enough for her. I told myself it wasn't worth the headache. Pillows weren't permanent. Then came the kitchen curtains. The ones my grandmother sewed by hand. Linda took them down, and replaced them with ruffled white ones from some generic home store. When I confronted her, she laughed and touched my arm like I was being silly. Sweetie, I'm helping. You'll thank me later. Sweetie? Oh, I saw red. But Dad didn't want conflict, and I didn't want to be the jealous daughter in a rom-com, so again I let it go. Then the living room furniture moved. She pushed the couch to the opposite wall, angled the recliner, moved the coffee table, and tried to hang one of her own paintings above the mantel. A painting of a beach sunset. In a house filled with my grandmother's landscape paintings and portraits, Dad told her to leave things alone. She pouted, and nothing changed. A week later, I found my bathroom towels, my grandmother's towels, gone, thrown out. Out with the old. Linda giggled when I asked. They were worn anyway. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like something sacred was being chipped away piece by piece. Like Linda wasn't just redecorating, she was rewriting the history of my home without my permission. My father tried to reassure me. She means well, he said. She's trying to feel included. This is my house. I snapped. She doesn't live here? He sighed. He looked tired. He didn't want to fight with either of us. But Linda didn't stop. One evening, she walked in holding a stack of paint color samples. I'm thinking we repaint the living room, she announced like the decision was already approved. Something airy, feminine, These walls are so old-fashioned. That was my last straw. My grandmother chose those colors. She mixed them herself. She painted these walls with my mother before I was even born. No, I told her, steady and cold. We're not changing the living room. Linda blinked like she didn't understand the word no. Then she smiled tightly. You know, you're being very territorial, and you're being disrespectful. I shot back. Her nostrils flared, but she said nothing. After she left, I told my dad I was done trying to talk to Linda. I had tried reasoning. I had tried boundaries. I had tried politeness. None of it worked. My dad shrugged and said, do what you need to. I'm staying out of it. He had no idea what I meant. I barely knew what I meant. But something inside me had shifted. A quiet, simmering anger that felt like it belonged to me and maybe to my grandmother too. Because here's the thing Linda didn't know: this house is old. It makes noises. It shifts. It creaks. It breathes. And Linda had a habit, a very consistent habit, of coming over when my dad wasn't home, letting herself in with the spare key she somehow acquired, rearranging, teddying, adding touches. So I decided if she wanted to play interior decorator, I'd let her decorate a haunted house. Not dangerous, not harmful, just unsettling. A whisper of something she wouldn't be able to rationalize away. And oh, she walked right into it. But before I could put the plan into action, something happened that showed me just how bad her boundary issues really were. One day, while I was working from home, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be my cat. I opened my door expecting Dad, but it was Linda. Linda, halfway up the staircase, holding one of my grandmother's porcelain figurines and humming to herself. She froze when she saw me. Oh, she gasped. Didn't know you were home. Why are you upstairs? I asked. Oh, I was just straightening things. She smiled like this was perfectly normal. That was the moment something inside me snapped into place. Sharp, focused, cold. If she wanted to treat my home like her personal playground, fine, but she was about to learn something important. My grandmother may be gone, but in this house, she's still very much present. I smiled at Linda. A slow, calm smile. Right, I said, just tidying. She didn't know she had just walked into her last day of peace in my house. And the haunting had only just begun after that day. Seeing Linda on the stairs with my grandmother's figurine dangling from her fingers like it meant nothing. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched in my own home. Not by something supernatural. No, by her. Linda had crossed from annoying to evasive, from overstepping to territorial, and the irony was so thick it made me dizzy. She accused me of being territorial while she prowled my hallways like a cat marking someone else's furniture. And the worst part, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a battlefield. Every morning I left my room. I braced myself for something to be moved, cleaned, replaced, or outright thrown away. Every night I walked the house before bed, making sure my grandmother's things were where I left them. My grandmother's shawl folded neatly on the rocking chair. Her jewelry box closed and latched. Her reading glasses in the little dish by the couch. These weren't decorative items, they were memories. Pieces of her I kept alive. And Linda wanted to brighten them up. It was infuriating, but beneath the anger was a heavier feeling I didn't want to admit fear. Not of Linda as a person. She wasn't dangerous. But fear that she'd eventually break something sentimental. Or throw something away without a second thought. Fear that she'd slowly erase my grandmother from the house she had loved so fiercely. This fear gnawed at me at night. There were evenings I lay awake, my brain buzzing, listening for the faint sound of a door opening downstairs. For keys. For footsteps. And it happened more often than I realized. Linda had a pattern. She'd show up mid-morning on days my dad worked. Let herself in, tidy. I knew when she'd been there because things were too straight. The pillows were crisp. The table coasters aligned. The chairs shifted just slightly off their original angle. Her touches were subtle, but to me, they were glaring. My dad apologized constantly. I know it's frustrating, he would say, rubbing the back of his neck. I've told her a dozen times. And she ignores you? I'd reply, she ignores me. He looked guilty, torn between the daughter he loved and the woman he was trying to date. A man trying to rebuild his life without upsetting either side. But the truth, he didn't understand the depth of it. Not the way I did. One night, after Linda had visited, earlier that day, I found a small porcelain box that belonged to my grandmother sitting in a different room entirely. The lid was crooked, a chip at the corner it didn't have before. My heart clenched. I held it in my hands like a wounded bird, trying to swallow the wave of grief and rage. That was the night I cried, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears sitting in the hallway alone, staring at the chipped porcelain as if it were a piece of my grandmother's voice lost forever. I whispered into the dim hallway, "I'm sorry, Grandma. Sorry that I let someone disrespect what she left behind. Sorry that I wasn't strong enough to protect the home she loved. Sorry that my boundaries didn't seem to matter to someone determined to bulldoze through them. But those tears didn't leave me weak. They sharpened me. Because that night, sitting on the wooden floor she used to mop on Sundays, I realized something talking to Linda wasn't going to work. Being polite wasn't going to work. Even my dad couldn't stop her. She didn't respect words. She only respected dominance, control, fear. So if fear was the only language she understood, I could speak fluently. But psychological games aren't built overnight. And before the haunting could begin, I needed to understand her. What scared Linda? What were her weak spots? What made her uncomfortable? And as fate would have it, I didn't need to look far. A few days later, Linda came over while I was in the kitchen. She didn't see me at first. She walked in from the front hallway, muttering to herself in that self-important way of hers. "This house needs brightness too stiff. Old energy vibe. Old energy vibe." Really? My grandmother would have laughed. I stayed behind the corner of the doorway, listening. Linda moved toward the living room and said out loud to Nanoe, "Ugh, these pictures are crooked again. I swear this house is just eerie. Things move when I'm not here." I froze. That was it. There it was. Her weakness. She was already half spooked by the house's natural creaks and shifts. She felt watched. She felt unsettled. Perfect. The next morning, I woke up early, before Linda's usual visit window, and began phase 1. Not a haunting, not yet. Just friction, confusion. I moved the living room picture frames just slightly askew. Not enough to look intentional. Just enough to make someone question their own memory. I shifted the sofa cushions, but in the wrong order. I placed the remotes in the cabinet instead of on the coffee table. Upstairs, I rotated the guest room rug a few inches off center, opened the jewelry box lid, just a crack, and moved the rocking chair, just an inch. That was the key. Small enough to make her doubt herself, big enough that she'd feel it. Linda arrived later that day, and though I pretended to be in my room working, I listened. Her footsteps paused, then again, then again. A soft gas, then in a shaky voice. "Didn't I move this yesterday?" I smiled into my pillow. The next day I escalated it. The jewelry box moved to the opposite side of the dresser. The shawl draped faintly over the chair instead of folded. Her reading glasses placed on a table no one used. At dinner that evening, Linda told my dad, "Things in your house are moving. Rearranging. I don't know how else to say it." He blinked slowly, unsurprised. "Oh," he said casually. "Probably just us tidying up." "No," she said, frowning. "It's different. Like someone undoes what I fix." I almost choked on my water. Dad shrugged. "I haven't noticed anything." Linda's eyes darted between us, unsettled. The next day she arrived again, predictable as clockwork, and this time she moved the rocking chair back where she wanted it. So I waited until she left, then placed it right back to where it had been, but angled slightly toward the door, like it was watching. When she visited next, she screamed. Not loud, just a quick, startled cry. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself. "This house is, I don't know, off." She left early, and I wasn't even close to done, because at this point, Linda wasn't just spooked. She was spiraling. She questioned her memory. She questioned her routines. She questioned the house itself. But in the quiet part of my mind, the part that sounded like my grandmother, I heard a whisper teach her to respect what's yours. And I was about to do exactly that. Because phase 1 was nothing. Phase 2 would be unforgettable. And the perfect opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. It was the day Linda came over unannounced while I was home and began moving furniture again. The exact moment I stepped quietly into the hallway with my grandmother's shawl draped around my shoulders. I realized this was it. The moment Linda would finally see something she couldn't explain away. The moment her fear would peak. The moment every boundary she stomped on would stomp back. But the execution needed perfection, timing, silence, presence. I moved down the stairs without a sound. Her back was to me. She was humming while rearranging the lamp. Our lamp, when I stepped past the doorway, not stopping, not speaking, just drifting. A figure in a shawl she thought had vanished years ago. She screamed, dropped the lamp, spun around eyes wide with terror. Linda's scream didn't echo. It ripped through the house. The kind of scream that vibrates in the walls and makes the air feel charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I pretended not to know why she was yelling. Of course I did. But I stepped back up the stairs quickly and silently, just out of her line of sight, keeping my head down so she wouldn't catch the shawl in motion. When she turned around, panting, pale, shaking, I made sure the stairs creaked just enough for her to notice I wasn't in the room she'd seen the figure in. She stumbled toward the hallway, wide-eyed. "Who's here?" she yelled, her voice cracking. I waited just long enough before stepping fully into view from the top of the stairs. Shawl gone. Face calm. "Oh," I said, blinking like she'd startled me. "I didn't know you were here." She stared at me, really stared at me, her breath coming in frantic bursts. You didn't just walk through the living room?" I asked, eyebrows raised. "I've been upstairs." I let that sink in. Her face drained. Her lips trembled. She swallowed hard. "But I saw a woman." Her voice faltered. Her fingers pressed against her chest like she was holding her heart in place. She was wearing an old shawl. I tilted my head, frowning slightly, using silence as a blade. "A shawl?" I asked softly. "What did it look like?" Linda described it. Exact pattern, exact colors, exact way it draped. I blinked slowly. "That sounds like my grandmother's shawl," I whispered. "But I haven't seen that in years." Linda's whole body trembled. "I think. This house, something's here." Her breath hitched. "Something is moving things. Things are changing when I leave. And now it's showing itself." I stepped down one stair, slowly, deliberately. "Linda," I said gently, "are you sure you're feeling okay?" She backed up a step like I'd pushed her. "I'm not crazy," she shouted. "I know what I saw." I held up my hands in a gesture of calm. "I didn't say you were crazy, but this house is old. It creaks. Things shift. Shadows look strange sometimes. And if you're under stress..." She cut me off. No, I'm not imagining things. Something walked past me. I paused, then asked the perfect question. "Were you moving the furniture again?" She froze. Her eyes flicked toward the lamp she had dropped. Guilt washed over her face. I was just trying to." "So you were," I said softly. Then I stepped down another stair, lowering my voice. Maybe Grandma didn't like that. The chill that went through her was visible. "No," she whispered. No. She grabbed her purse off the table with trembling hands and rushed for the door. "I don't feel comfortable here," she said breathlessly. "Not alone. Not anymore." And then she was gone. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the house felt still, calm, like the walls had exhaled. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Linda's fear was genuine, but fear fades. And she wasn't someone who gave up easily. She might come back. She might convince herself she imagined everything. She might decide to fix the house again the moment her nerves settled. And I couldn't risk that. This was my home. My grandmother's home. Not hers to redesign. Not hers to sanitize. Not hers to overwrite. So I needed something final. Something that would cement this house in her mind as a place she should never tamper with again. The haunting wasn't the revenge. It was the warning. The real revenge needed precision. For days after the shawl incident, the house returned to its comforting rhythm. The air felt lighter, my sleep deeper. The furniture stayed put. The towels stayed mine. The curtains stayed up. Even my dad walked around with this subtle little smirk, like he knew Linda was avoiding the house, but wasn't sure why. I hadn't told him what happened. Not yet. I wanted him to hear it from her, but he didn't press. He wasn't stupid, just tired. Then, one night over dinner, my dad said, "So Linda's been talking." I feigned curiosity, stirring my pasta. "Oh," he kept his voice neutral. "She thinks the house might be haunted." I paused, just a breath too long. "What?" I said, raising my brows in mock disbelief. "Why would she think that?" Dad leaned back in his chair, watching me closely. "She said she saw something, or someone, in a shawl." I tilted my head. "A shawl, your grandmother's shawl," he said. "Oh," I blinked. "She told you that?" He nodded. "And what did you say?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "I told her your grandmother loved this house. And if there is a spirit here, it's probably peaceful." I bit back a smile. Linda didn't see a peaceful spirit. She saw a warning, and she had finally, truly, completely stopped redecorating. But my revenge wasn't about scaring her once. It was about boundaries, about forcing her to feel what I felt unsettled, powerless, intruded upon. So I crafted a plan, not a jump scare, not a prank, not physical, nothing cruel, nothing dangerous. Just a perfectly tailored psychological reminder that the house wasn't hers, and never would be. I waited for the day she inevitably returned. Because Linda was predictable. She didn't come over for a week, then 2. Then she started circling again, texting Dad more, asking subtle questions about the house. "Has anything else happened? Have things moved again? Have you seen anything unusual?" Dad would shrug and say no, and I could feel Linda's internal battle from across the dinner table: curiosity versus fear, control versus uncertainty. So I helped tip the scales. I told Dad, in casual as anything, "I'm going to clean out the storage room tomorrow." Found some of Grandma's old things in there. Linda froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Old things? What kind?" "Oh, just personal stuff," I said lightly. "Letters, clothes. Maybe some of her church hats. She loved those things." Linda swallowed hard. "Her personal belongings." I said. "I'm thinking of displaying a few. You know, keeping her memory alive in the home." Linda stiffened. She didn't like that. She didn't like the idea of my grandmother's presence growing stronger, not fading. That tiny detail was important, because it meant what was coming next would hit her even harder. The next day was a Saturday. Dad went out to the hardware store. And right on schedule, Linda pulled into the driveway. She hesitated before getting out of her car, gripped the steering wheel like it anchored her, then stepped onto the porch, glancing around like she expected a ghost to tackle her. She knocked instead of letting herself in. Progress. I opened the door slowly. "Hi," I said, polite but cool. "Is your dad here?" She asked quickly. "No. He'll be back in a bit. You're welcome to wait." She didn't respond. She just stepped inside, stiff as a board, and hovered near the entryway like she wanted to stay close to an exit. "Good." I gestured toward the living room. "I'm sorting some of my grandmother's things. You can sit if you want." Linda shook her head. No, I'll just stand." I pretended not to notice the way she kept glancing at the hallway where she'd seen the figure. Then I made the next move, subtle, soft, but perfectly timed. I picked up a small music box, my grandmother's, and wound it. The melody drifted through the room, slow and nostalgic. A song my grandmother used to hum while knitting. A tune Linda had never heard, but that somehow felt old, ancient, weighty. Linda flinched at the first note. "What's that?" she whispered. "One of Grandma's boxes," I said. "I found it in storage yesterday." She stepped back. "Just a little. Just enough." "Did you move that chair?" she blurted suddenly, pointing at the rocking chair. I glanced at it. "No," I said. "It's been there." Her eyes darted between me and the chair. "It wasn't in that spot," she insisted. "Last time I was here, before I saw," I let her trail off. "Maybe you're remembering wrong," I said gently. She looked like she wanted to argue. But then the house creaked, just a normal sound. The house always did it. But Linda practically jumped out of her skin. Her breathing quickened. I don't like this," she stammered. "I don't think this house wants me here." I stepped closer to her. Not threateningly, just close enough for her to lower her voice reflexively. "Linda," I said with a softness that felt like velvet and steel at the same time. "Sometimes a house holds on to a person. Their memories, their habits, their presence. Her eyes widened. And if you don't respect those memories, I paused. Let the silence breathe. The house pushes back. Linda grabbed her purse. I have to go, she whispered. Tell your father I called. She rushed out the door, and when it slammed shut behind her, the house truly felt like it belonged to me again. But the revenge, the real revenge, it wasn't complete until I heard what Linda confessed to my dad later that night, because what she told him made everything worth it.